Good morning, and welcome back to DNA. This is episode 3 of 3. Here, we're covering the final stage of these 3 episodes. This is the point where tariffs usually get wrapped in noise, emotion, and bad explanations. So I want to slow this down and be very deliberate. At its core, what the United States is doing, and any country has the right to do, is defend its market position. And let's take a moment and let's sip on that. That doesn't automatically mean a government is executing that policy perfectly. No, not at all. That is a separate conversation. But the principle matters. Every country has the right to decide what comes into its borders, and every country has the right to decide under what conditions those goods are sold inside its markets and its borders. That's not hostility, not one bit. That is sovereignty. Tariffs exist because markets are not naturally fair. They never have been. Costs vary by country. They vary by labor standards. They vary by environmental rules. They vary by subsidies, currency values. So when people talk about free trade, what they usually mean is unadjusted trade, not fair trade. Tariffs are the adjustment mechanism used. Now, this is the part that gets misrepresented the most. Tariffs are not business being shut down. They are not saying, you can't do business with us anymore. They are not saying your products are banned. And they are not saying trade is ending. No, they're not. That would be catastrophic. That would damage trade agreements and destabilize supply chains indefinitely. That is not what's happening. What's being said is this. You can still do business here, but it has to be done on a fair playing field. Tariffs don't say you can't sell. They say you can't sell at an artificial advantage. There's a difference. If a country can produce something at a certain cost and another country floods that market at a lower price because of subsidies, wage suppression, or relaxed standards, and even or currency effects, the receiving country has every right to respond accordingly. That response doesn't require permission. If there's a formal trade agreement in place and one side violates it, that becomes a legal issue governed by treaties and enforcement. And we have mechanisms to deal with that. We're not talking about that here. Not at all. We're talking about the baseline rule. There is no agreement, no guaranteed access, no locked-in obligation. None. Then no country is required to accept an unlimited amount of imports at any price. Trade is optional, access is conditional. Markets are not public property. That's not a political statement. That's how trade actually works. Another point is how tariffs are used today. They are no longer blunt weapons. Modern tariffs are targeted. They're applied to specific goods, specific inputs, and specific pressure points. That's because global trade today isn't about finished product. It's about components like steel, semiconductors, batteries, machinery, intermediate parts. When tariffs hit those inputs, trade doesn't stop. The math changes. Companies don't leave markets overnight. They reroute production. They adjust sourcing. They pass costs downstream. They rebalance operations. And that's intentional. Tariffs today are pressure tools. They are used to reduce volume, correct distortions, and slow overdependence on a single supply source. Tariffs are often paired with exemptions, delays, phase-ins, and phase-outs. They are not shutdown notices. They are signals. The signal to business is simple. This is a good time to diversify. Spread production, reduce dependence, and concentration risk. Stop relying on one low-cost pipeline as your entire strategy. That's not aggression. That is risk management. Healthy trade doesn't come from one side dominating the flow. It comes from balanced participation. So when you strip away the headlines and the emotion, tariffs aren't about closing doors. They're about setting terms. You're still welcome to do business, just not on terms that undermine the market you're selling it into. They don't destroy economies. They slowly change incentives. They don't shut down business. They force adaptation. And there's one last clarification that matters. Tariffs are not a direct tax on foreign businesses. They're not paid by the exporting country. They're not absorbed overseas. Tariffs are paid at the border by the importer, and that cost moves through the system. So if your country is implementing tariffs, it means you're paying more for a product than you otherwise would have. That higher price gets passed along to consumers. That's not a flaw, that's the mechanicism. Tariffs work by raising the cost of imported goods inside the country, applying them on purpose. And it's to change buying behavior and rebalance the market. There are trade-offs. They ask domestic consumers to absorb some costs in exchange for market balance, supply stability, or long-term resilience. So once you understand that, tariffs stop sounding emotional and start making sense structurally. So for now, that completes the series. But we're not done with this. As things develop, we will follow up as needed. And when misunderstandings show up, we'll clarify them and correct them. Because let's be real here. If this was your country, you'd want the same rules to apply. You'd want the right to protect your markets. You'd want fair terms. You'd want balance. And if that's what we want for ourselves, it's only fair to expect the same standard to apply to others. Please keep your coffee warm. Stay safe. Cheers.